All right, welcome everyone. Nate is here to lead our session today, and take it away, Nate.
Cool. All right, everybody. Today we're going to be going over vendor payments and supplier invoices. So let me start by sharing my screen. So these are going to be primarily be based off of our unload schedules that we got. So if I go to our purchases module, I've already created a couple purchase orders, and therefore I've already created a couple of unload schedules. So these four over here, I have three for GE and one for Lazy Boy. They both are deriving from one PO, but I've unloaded one of these POs in three different ways. So with all that, we're going to go into our supplier invoices. Now in here, we want to go up to the top left over here to our new button. Now, when it comes to doing your supplier invoices, we obviously do need to grab our supplier. So I'm going to start with a Lazy Boy supplier. Here is where you can put your invoice number. So this will be primarily the number that you get from Lazy Boy. That way you can kind of match it up with your numbers. And then here's the date we can put for our invoice. I'll just leave that for today's date. Now, this is an important field right here, this middle column right here. So this is the invoice total over here. So you want to match this with whatever the invoice total that you got from the actual supplier invoice from Lazy Boy. So let's go grab our supplier or our purchase order that we got. I'm going to do this by opening up this middle button, the browse button, to find the PO that I want. Should be the July 9th one right there. So this one PO. So on this one PO, let me go ahead and look at this PO number right here. So on this PO, these were a combination of items. So these are on items that have a master SK over here, but they have different attributes to them. So the attributes, when I unloaded them with each of those different covers. And you can see the covers right there. So all the attributes, I just used one, for example. All the different attributes will kind of display underneath of the item name. Now in here, the current settings I have in this account is using PO purchase order numbers. You can definitely use this using just purchase documents, but we find this a lot of people using the PO numbers. So you're basically matching up with your supplier invoice with however much you paid from these different items. So if you paid all three of these, we're going to select all three of them by that column right there, or you could individually select them. Now, this PO price right here will show what was on the PO price, but then we can always manipulate the invoice unit price. So if that's the case, maybe the price went up a little bit. Maybe this is actually 470. So we have a total pending amount down here of 1481. This is the number that we want to match with up here. So if you put 1481, that makes this difference 0. This will allow us to continue. Now on the supplier invoice, if there was more additional expenses, we do have that specify additional expense button right here. So if you click on that, right now in this account, we just have one line for freight, but you can have different multiple lines, different expense counts they can have. Let's say the freight for this one was like 50 bucks. You could put a note there for whatever it was. And then it was very important, if you want to pay this amount onto this supplier invoice, we want to credit this supplier. So with that checked, we press OK. Now our difference went basically up to 50 bucks. So now we want to go over here, make sure that we add that $50 to that, whatever that math is. Just made that easier number. Let's just do $10, for example. So now it is $14.91. There we go. Oh, we had an extra $10. I'll try to do that. There we go. So now we have a $0 difference on here. Now we have these two checkboxes right below the additional expense button over here. If we want to apply this effective rate per unit to my purchase price of these items, all this does is update your effective rate per unit column over here. So by default in the screen right now, it's all the way on the right-hand side. So if we check that, you see the rate will go up a little bit. So what that does is it will aggregate your additional expense, which in this case is $10. It's going to divide that up between the quantity and the different prices that we have for our items. Now what we could do is go down to the payment schedule here's where we can go and input, whatever your payment date, what this is. Every supplier is different. We can say this is maybe a net 31. So if we say that our due date is August the 10th, and then we'll say that we pay the full amount. There we go. So you can definitely come over here and give your, your different pay schedules there, or you can just say that, a month from now, we'll just pay that. So with all that said, we'll hit that create button, and that's how you create your supplier invoice. Now that's a supplier invoice that was based off of one PO. Now we could definitely have a supplier invoice that's a different combination of different things. So that's what I did with the other GE supplier invoice that we're about to create. So again, we're gonna go up to the top left. We're gonna go ahead and choose our supplier. If you have your supplier invoice, that was where you could put that there. But for now, we'll go ahead and grab our first couple of purchase orders. So this one was done yesterday. That was a Lazy Boy one. There it is. Okay. So once I grabbed my purchase order, inside this purchase order, it was 15 different items. But maybe when we received the supplier invoice, maybe we only received a couple of them at a time. So maybe this supplier invoice was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now it is our duty to come over here and basically match up with our, our items to our supplier invoices. So I'm just gonna take these first 5, for example. So those top items over there, go ahead and put a price in here. This is where you would want to match up with the prices that are on your supplier invoice per item. I'm just giving me some numbers here. This could have also been done during the PO setup stage. All right, so those items there. So I can see once we scroll down over here, we start to accumulate a pending amount now. So with this pending amount, I won't do any additional expenses this time, but with this pending amount, we want to go ahead and make sure that we have the same amount up here on the supplier invoice. So first step is to put your supplier invoice total with whatever you got from, in this case, General Electric. So it was this number right here. So that will allow you to kind of match up your numbers with what items you have. That way we have this little thing down here for difference. So if there's a difference in any money, it'll let you know that we can make some adjustments. So that does help people out, because they want to make sure that their supplier invoice matches up with what's in Althea Suite. So all that's there. We got these 5 items. We're gonna go ahead and create a payment date. So because this is a big supplier invoice, maybe we're doing the first payment, 2 weeks from now, so on the 24th. And maybe this payment amount was $800. We'll do 800. So as we made that, our first payment in 2 weeks is $800. You can see that actually went and reduced our total down over there. So now we have 1,087 left to pay. So maybe our next payment date is 2 weeks out of that one. So 24th, that'll be the 7th, and then maybe another $800. There we go. So now we have 287 left. So then maybe after that, maybe on the 14th, we pay the final amount. So I can hit that black button with the white arrow, and that'll move everything over to that payment amount field, and then we just hit add. So here's where you can set up your schedules too. This will also show up on the menu once we save and create the supplier invoice. It'll show up as a column of itself. So once we hit that create button again, we get back to our supplier invoice screen, and then here's that column right here, the payment schedule note. So our Lazy Boy payment, it's a month from now on August the 10th. And then our GE one, it's a makeup of one PO, but we have 3 different supplier invoices and we're paying them like that. Or excuse me, that's the first supplier invoice. And then the other supplier invoices we do need to create. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll create another one. General Electric. New supplier invoice number. We're gonna go grab that same PO. So our GE1. Now we got just these 2 items. Oh, wait, this is the wrong PO, sorry. Oop, actually, actually use up all the supplier invoices up from the other ones. That's why we can't see that. That's fine, no matter. So let's go and look at these supplier invoices and show you how to pay these. So we have these two supplier invoices that we created. These can be created ahead of time too, or you can create them the day of. But the next place to go to is the make payments. So here is a very important step too, whether or not you want to make a payment. It's with your supplier invoices. If you want to make a payment directly with your supplier invoice, or if you want to make a payment with a payment aggregator. Now, really quickly, before I show you the regular supplier invoice way, a payment aggregator is a third party that's helping you basically pay for your items that we can get them procured in. So the payment aggregators can be found in the same purchases module. Go to payment aggregators, and then this account, we just have Wells Fargo. Very simple to create these. If I just modify this, I'll show you what the parameters look like. So we just basically need a name, and then all the description and all these parameters are optional. And then we do have a field down over here. In case you pay Wells Fargo with a check, you can, put the name to print on the check and it'll print on the spot. And in this account, we do have a financial account dedicated to it as well. So with all that being said, let's go back to supplier invoice. So to start, or excuse me, make payments. So to start to make a payment against a supplier invoice, the first place we can go to is this one up here. So it's third from the right, make payment to supplier invoice. This is dependent on our supplier, obviously. So if we put lazy boy, so here's a list of all of our current supplier invoices in the system. The one that we just created is not on here because we're showing a payment due in the next 10 days. In the next 10 days, it goes all the way to the 20th. So we won't be able to see the one that's due all the way in August. So if we do the next 90 days, for example, let's go ahead and find that payment date. August 10th, there it is. So this one right here. So for the supplier invoice, once the day that comes to pay this, you come over here to our payment amount. And if you did want to make a partial payment, we could, maybe this was split into two. So maybe we want to do 900 this time and then, another amount another time. But obviously, if you want to pay for the whole amount, we'll just do the 1491 and leave it like that. And then come over here and use any one of your payment modes to show Althea Suite how you pay the supplier. So here's where you would find all your different credit notes if you want to add. So if you had any credit notes for Lazy Boy, General Electric, Whirlpool, whatever it is, you won't see a list of them right here. You will need to click this new button. Once you click that new button, you will see any and all of your supplier credit notes that you could use. We can see this one. It's because it's been partial, so we must have used $500 at some point to use that. So you can use this to pay for your supplier invoice. Once you put it in there, it's going to have a use amount there. So now we have a supplier credit note being used that reduced our total down. So we're only really focused on our 1491 over here. So we have a payment total plus our supplier credit note. So now we want to show how we pay the rest of this. So maybe we pay this with a check or maybe ACH or whatever one that you want to use to show that. And then that will give you that difference, the 991 there. And then we'll hit that create button. So that's how to pay the supplier invoices using just the regular payment mode up there to make a payment and showing Althea Suite how you paid it that way. Then obviously, if you want to use the aggregator, we just come over here and use the fourth option, supplier invoice payment aggregator. Choose the aggregator. In this case, we only have the one. But what this will do is give you a list of all your supplier invoices. And then in here, we do have the filters. So if you want to look at a specific one, maybe General Electric. Now, again, it's not showing me the one that we just did because it's not due the next 10 days. So if you do the next 90 days, we should see those three. So the first one that's to do is the closest one over here. So we could pay this ahead of time, but maybe today's the 24th and we want to show that we paid that. So again, choose your payment option. I'm not sure if we have any GE credit notes to use. Oh, we have one. That's a Whirlpool one, but I won't use it. So let's say that we got this through an ACH. So just check the box. You can update this too. So if you did want to make a partial payment, you can. Althea Suite does recognize that you still owe $400 for that pending amount. So it will reduce as you pay partial payments, but we'll just make a full payment here and then show how we paid that. Here's you can put any details in here. These details will follow into the final transactions and you'll be able to see the details there as well. So let's go ahead and hit that create button. And that creates us our paid supplier invoice there for that one. So that supplier invoice still has some payments to be made on it, obviously for the next couple of weeks. But that's how you basically create the supplier invoice and show how you pay it either paying it with yourself with a make a payment or paying that with the payment aggregator. All right. So at this point, does anybody have any questions?
Hi, Nathan. I have a question about there was an option to update cost of goods sold on when you were entering the supplier invoice.
Mhm.
Is that if the product has been sold to a customer? I'm trying to figure out if you make changes on the pricing, what does that affect? Does that affect the inventory if you've already received the items in? Does it affect the customers, that have purchased the items?
It really depends
Of the
on which stage it is, and where the history is. We have the setting now to where we can update the cost per serial number now. Um, that might be a different webinar that we go over, but let me show you really quickly, see if I can answer this question. As my mouse behaves. So in the serial number manager, we do have the history of it, and the history does contain the cost of goods history too of the item. So let's see if we can find the ones that we just did today, or at least yesterday. All right, so in here we have the serial number history. Kind of shows you where it came from. That's the purchase history. And then over here we'll have all of the information with the purchasing. Now with the cost of goods of the item, let's go and look at this one specifically. So in the item manager, we go to the context menu, we have cost of goods history. It will show you kind of how it got updated. So, this all happened today, but as time goes on, you'll see the different cost of goods before document and the cost of goods after it. So, like, what's the reason behind the question?
I just noticed that there was the option to update cost of goods sold on that supplier invoice, and I wasn't sure why
Gotcha.
you would or you wouldn't choose that option.
Yeah, so let's see if I can just modify it. You're talking about this one right here, include additional expenses and costs?
Yes.
Yeah. So this would have been one of the checkboxes you would have chose. So the applying the effective rate per unit on the purchase price, that will allow us to update the column over here, the effective rate. So for me, it's all the way on the right hand side. But for you, if this is an important column, you can move it all the way to the left hand side. So if we did both of those, this one will give it to the purchase price, and that will basically allow you to keep updating your price for the landed cost there. And then the additional expenses, the $10 that I put in there, if you want to add that on to the cost of goods. So it's up to you if you want to put the freight on the cost of goods or if you want to leave the additional expenses, to a different account.
Okay, so if the item's already been sold, after you update, include the additional expenses and cost of goods, then it would update like the freight fees. It would increase that on that sale cost of goods sold.
That's a good question. I don't know how specific it would update. So like if you had an invoice before and then you purchased the item and then updated the cost of goods, you wanted to update the cost from the previous invoice?
Yeah, so if say we sold something and the invoice comes in a month later from the
hmm
vendor,
hmm
we enter this invoice in and we see that the price is now $100 higher because they had a price increase. If I click that include additional expense and cost of goods sold, will it go back to that original sale and update the sale that it was sold on, or is it not really linked that way? It will just update it for new items that are sold.
It'll update for newer items. Now,
Okay.
if we update the COGS, I'll have to check on that if it'll go back and update the rest of them, the
Okay,
previous
yeah,
ones.
I'm just curious if it would specifically if that line item was kind of tied to a sale is more kind of what I'm questioning because that's typically how we purchase items, is it's for a specific customer and it's
Mhm.
already been sold.
Okay, I got you. I know if there was no cost of goods on there, then there's a way for us to update that. But I don't know if it'll constantly keep updating based off the sales and the purchasing in the future. Let me get back with you on that one. All right, so that's supplier invoicing. Um, whether or not if you want to pay that with the aggregator or how you want to set that up. The other setting, I didn't show you this. I might as well show you the settings as well. So in this account, we are specifically set up to use the supplier invoicing. So if we go to our purchase settings, which is the one with the shopping cart in it. So in here, we are pay to supplier invoice via supplier invoice. What this button does, this setting, is it locks out the ability for people to complete purchases from the PO level. So it kind of wants you to have the PO go through the unload schedule, create your purchase document that way. And then with the setting enabled, we are using the POs, the PO numbers themselves. If you have this unchecked and you go to supplier invoicing, the supplier invoicing uses the purchase documents that gets created. Now, those purchase documents can also, be linked with the unload schedule that you unload. So there's a way to measure it that way. But we see a lot of people using this option and paying the supplier invoice or creating their supplier invoicing using only PO numbers. That way they can kind of keep everything in line and there's not like any confusion on what's been, brought in and what hasn't. And then that setting that we had whenever we're paying the supplier invoicing where it says show the next 10 days, this is where the setting is. So if you want to default this to always say 30 days. So if you want to look at 30 days upcoming, or if you only want to look at this the first 7 days. So this is where that setting is for that. So that is supplier invoicing and vendor payments. Does anybody else have any other questions? One more thing I will mention though, if we go back to the serial number manager. So we've kind of beefed up the serial number manager to include all the data that we are getting in from our supplier invoices. So if I reset this to default. So if we come over here, let's go find the lazy boy ones. So we are showing the attribute inside of the item name inside the serial number manager. So in the serial number manager, people are going to be going to find their QLNs for their lazy boy items. You can see there's these 3 QLNs right here. So we're showing the item name in here, the cover, and whatever it was. So all the attributes, whatever the item is, will be linked in here. Then obviously, if these guys were linked to a specific customer, we'll have all that data in here as well as invoice and any order data. Alrighty. Well, that's all I had.
Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat here. All right, so if there are no further questions for Nate, then we will go ahead and bring the session to a close. As we mentioned in our newsletter that was sent out yesterday, we are going to pause holding our sessions like this for a little bit because we've got prime time coming up. So if you're going to be going to Nashville for Nationwide's prime time, you can find us at booth 2239. And we'll pick back up with these in September once all of our stuff calms down in August, and as well as people traveling and what have you. So if there are no further questions, then thanks so much for joining us today. And I will post the recording of this on our YouTube and our website later on today as well. All right, thanks so much for joining, everybody. Have a great day.
Yeah, take care, guys.